welcome to Stillspeakpod. So I did not do a video Saturday evening or Sunday evening. I did 3 videos on Friday evening. One was about this case, the Petito laundry case. Another was an update on the Murdaugh case. And then a third one was about missing Joy McDonald. And I took off Saturday night. I was going to come with a video last night, but I had to take care of some other things. So I did that. So now I'm here. So we have some things to talk about since 2 days went by where we didn't discuss anything. Now I know that things have died down a little bit. It's not as chaotic since the remains were identified as Brian Laundrie. And some people are kind of like, all right, it's over. He's dead, she's dead, end of story, let's move on, right? And other people just can't let it go. And why can't they let it go, including myself? Because there's just so many questions unanswered, so many. And so we're hoping that over time, we're going to get some of those answers. But we'll see, right? Hopefully we get some, and maybe not on others. Some answers are not going to make much of any sense at all and probably are going to outrage us or make us laugh at some point. And something that happened tonight in regards to information was ridiculous. So let's start. Now, I said on here a bazillion times, it feels like, that I follow many, many, many cases. And therefore, I'm in a ton of Facebook groups. And sometimes in a case, I'm really active, and other times I might comment here or there. And in the ones that I'm really active, groups get to know me. And sometimes they even look forward to hearing what I have to say on something, just from my perspective of trying to stay unbiased and whatnot. And it's been pointed out to me on more than one occasion that I seem to have this tendency to pick up on certain details really fast in chaotic moments that many other people need extra time to pick up on. Listen, I'm not like a conceited person by any means, like at all, so I'm not tooting my own horn here. I didn't even know this about myself until others, started to point it out. And I'm saying it because this evening, something absolutely ridiculous came out, like I just said, in regards to the now confirmed deceased Brian Laundrie. And when this information came out, while everybody else was flipping the heck out in typing as fast as they could on Brian Ensign's tweet and in the live feed for WFLA, instead I waited about 60 seconds maybe. Just gave that moment a pause while everybody was, typing and pounding their keyboards really fast. And I waited and I processed in that moment's time. And at that point, I went, hold up, wait a minute. Now, I'm going to tell you what that is, but first, I have to explain. So I need you to follow me here, bear with me, because I'm going to repeat things that I've said on here before, sometimes several times, and I'm doing this to refresh your brain so that you have the full story and context in mind when I make the point that I'm going to make, okay? So follow along. If you recall, a few days ago, I had a video where I talked about Stephen Bertolino, the laundry lawyer, saying that he did tell the FBI on Monday the 13th that Brian did not come home from the reserve. He said that he wasn't sure if he told them Monday the 13th, like that night, or if it was Tuesday morning the 14th. But then his contact with the FBI apparently went to him and confirmed that this past Friday that it was the 13th that he made them aware that Brian did not come home that night. So, we have not seen any actual proof of this, whether it's a phone log or a text message or an email. No proof has been provided, but this was according to Bertolino, that the FBI confirmed to him that it was the night of the 13th that he told them that Brian did not return. Then on Friday night, I made a video where I said that I was leaning more towards believing Bertolino because Northport seems to have made several mistakes. And I also said that if this is true, then Holy Mother, because wow, you led the public to believe that the parents delayed telling that he took off. And if that's not what happened, wow, because that moment is what caused the mob to want the parents' heads on a platter. Initially, people were angry because they weren't speaking, and they were angry that they didn't answer the Petito and Schmidt phone calls. But the night that we all found out that Brian wasn't in the home was the night the mob went insane. So if this is correct, what Bertolino is saying, and that the police, FBI, or whoever allowed the public to believe that, and that's not what happened, that is so messed up. Crazy messed up. And then a bit ago, I want to say it was 2 to 3 weeks ago, during the beginning of October, an abandoned car report came out. It was mostly redacted, but it was about the Mustang being left at the environmental park that's attached to the Carlton Reserve, where Brian left the Mustang, which confirms the parents saying through their lawyer that there was a note on the Mustang that it was going to be towed, hence why they took it home. Now, people keep harping on this. Even Josh Taylor tonight harped on this, and the fact that he was saying, well, why would you take the Mustang home? If you thought he was there, why would you take it home? Now, Josh Taylor saying that even tonight, along with many other people. However, again, and I said it before, I'm going to say it again, if there was a note saying that it was going to be towed, and there was a report that it had been abandoned, in Northport Department's, files, then of course they took it home. And what does it matter if it was going to get towed? He was going to end up having no car anyways. Whether they took it home or it got towed, he was going to have no car. So this whole harping on them taking the car home is really silly, in my opinion, to be honest, because again, if it got towed, what difference does it make? And this abandoned car report was on the 14th. That was Tuesday. And now remember, 11th was the first contact. The 12th is when Gabby's van was taken. Allegedly, the 13th is when Brian left. The 14th is this abandoned car report, okay? This report came out, it was either right after on the same day or the day after that it was changed from the 14th that Brian left to the 13th, okay? Which, again, with so many things going on in such a chaotic moment, it's easy to mess up what day it was. It really is. I can't even remember what I ate for breakfast, or even if I ate for breakfast today. I have no idea. So anyway, the story goes, Brian leaves the home in the Mustang to the reserve on the 13th. He did not return home. The lawyer claims he called it into his FBI contact that evening. Tuesday, the parents go and look for him. They find nothing. Later on in that day, Northport shows up to the environmental park. They see the abandoned car. They make the report. At some point, a note is left on the car, whether it was by Northport or the actual environmental park. We don't know. And then on Wednesday, the parents go back there. They look again, allegedly. Don't find Brian. They see the note, and they take the Mustang back home, which means that both parents left in a pickup truck. They drove to the environmental park, and then one got into the Mustang and drove it home. The other got into the pickup and drove that home. That would have been Wednesday the 15th. Now, reporters' footage backs this up, and so do pictures that were taken from outside the home. It shows that the Mustang was not there on the 13th in photos. On the 14th in footage, it shows it's not there. And then you see it's back on the 15th. And when I found the photos from the 13th showing the Mustang wasn't there, was in a video that I did, I don't know, about 2 weeks ago now. It has like over 1,500 views. It's like 30 minutes long. And I had went and dug up every photo I could find, because I recalled there being some pictures, but not many outside the home. And I did locate 2 or 3 from Monday the 13th, which did show the Mustang was not in the driveway. But on the 13th, the media really wasn't on this. Only local news was, and only some of them. It wasn't until the 14th when this case exploded. And it got even more intense on 17th when it was known that Brian was not in the home. I want you to remember that, because I'm going to come back to that point later after we go through all of this, okay? So this would mean that the Mustang was in the driveway on the 11th and on the 12th. When the police first made contact on the 11th, they should have seen the camper, the pickup truck, the Mustang, and the van, which there is room in the driveway for the van to have fit right behind the Mustang, okay? And it also should have been that way on the 12th, because they go there and tow away Gabby's van, and I'm going to assume that was the one closest to the road, and that's how they were easily able to get it towed away. But again, nobody was really covering the case on the 12th for there to be any photos or footage capturing this van being towed away. So this would mean that the officer who went there on the 11th, and then whoever went there on the 12th to help with towing of this vehicle, would have seen and identified which vehicles belong to the family, right? They would know they own the Mustang, they own a camper, and they own a truck, because they're all in the driveway. And then they could have assumed that maybe there was also a vehicle in the actual garage, but we later learn that it's full of storage and whatnot. Okay, so 11th, first contact. 12th, the van gets taken. 13th, he leaves the home. Okay. 14th, the parents go. They look for Brian. They don't find him. They go back on Wednesday. Again, they briefly look. They don't find him. They see the Mustang. There's a note. They take it home. Okay, great, wonderful. That's the 15th. So then the rest of the 15th comes and goes. Great. On the 16th was the Northport police chief press conference that included Joe Petito, Gabby's father, where the chief was asked if, he knew where Brian Laundrie was. He very confidently said yes. That evening, he was on TV with a reporter, and he was asked yet again, and he said yes. Friday night, a presser, when this is the 17th now, a presser was supposed to happen out in Wyoming, but it was canceled moments before law enforcement ends up showing up at the Laundrie home. This night was very, very chaotic. I tuned in for the Wyoming press conference. We quickly learned in the chat of that live feed that it was canceled, and then everybody started coming into that chat of the live feed saying, oh my god, law enforcement's at the house, and then the camera switched, this is WFLA, to outside the home. And it was just, wow. Very intense night, just insane. The end result was, of course, us finding out Brian was not in the home, and he had not been there since Tuesday, which we know later got changed to Monday. Okay, whatever. And then everybody was flabbergasted. I remember that night so very clearly. And at one point on WFLA's live feed, right after the news broke, Josh Taylor, the spokesperson for Northport Police, called into the live stream because he had been listening, and I guess he was annoyed by what people were saying, including the host, and he actually was very defensive about what everybody was saying as far as like, how could they let this happen? They said they knew where he was, blah, 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 blah. Josh was very annoyed. You can tell in his tone of voice, the way he was, what he was saying, he was very bothered. Now, we also know, and I said on here many, many, many times, that Josh Taylor kept saying during the beginning and even later that, we can't do surveillance on residents, we can't track or watch citizens, there's no crime, nothing we can do, blah, 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 blah. Okay, which all of that got blown out the water this past Friday when Brian Ensign disclosed that police actually installed cameras in a neighbor's yard and in a dumpster before and after Brian took off. So the whole, we can't watch citizens thing was basically a bunch of nonsense. Now, I knew that when he was saying it because I follow other cases and persons of interest have been watched in the past. So when he kept saying that, I'm like, why does he keep saying this? Like, this isn't even true. Yes, the Fifth Amendment things that he was saying, absolutely true. But this whole, we can't watch residents thing, I'm like, why is he saying this? So we know that's not true because the cameras being installed before and after Brian taking off proves that. Okay, so let's just say that he was saying that to make maybe Brian and his parents think that, maybe that was his motive, or maybe his motive was to cover the department's ass. I don't know, but everybody has a motive for everything, in my opinion, and he has his reasons. I'm sure that we'll probably never know why he was saying this. I don't really know that he would be saying this to make Brian and his parents think that, because they have a lawyer who would have told them what he's saying is not 100% true. So I don't know. I don't know why Josh was saying this. We also know, because I moaned and groaned and complained and whatever on this channel multiple times, that, and I also shared audio of Josh Taylor saying they did see Brian on first contact. They just did not speak with him. He said it twice. And a third time, he said it differently, where he said, we are 100% confident he was in that home at some point. But then weeks later, after I corrected countless amounts of people that the police did see him because they said that they did, Josh then conceded and said, no, we didn't see him, which really aggravated me because I was like, wait, what? I have you on audio. I know I wasn't hearing things. And I came here and I complained about that to you all because that really bugged me. I just could not even believe it. Okay, so you have all of that now fresh in your brain. Sorry, I'm trying not to laugh but this is just crazy. So you have that all fresh in your brain. Let's get to tonight's ridiculous news that came out. a reporter finally got an answer out of Josh Taylor on why the chief said that he knew where Brian was on the 16th during his press conference, and then again to a reporter that night when clearly he didn't know. And Bertolino made a point that when he heard the chief say, yes, we know where he is, he was thinking like, how do you know where he is when we don't even know where he is, right? So, here we go. I'm going to try to say this without cracking up laughing, so just bear with me. Josh claims that when the Mustang returned to the home on Wednesday the 15th, that Brian's mother had been driving it and she got out wearing a baseball cap, which, by the way, both her and Christopher Laundrie often wear baseball hats or baseball caps. And he said that basically it was a case of mistaken identity. They thought Roberta, who's a female and a woman and has much, much longer hair than Brian Laundrie did, was mistaken for her son. Yes, you heard that right. They're claiming that on the 16th, they said yes to knowing where Brian was because they thought that Brian returned to the home in the Mustang on the 15th, when really it was his mother, I don't know what that was about, Roberta. You gotta be kidding me. Oh, what? Huh? Okay. Before we dive into this ridiculousness, let me go back to the opening of this, video. When I mentioned that tonight when this came out, that I took 60 seconds to process this information, and I made a point on one of the live streams, and prior to that, when everybody else was flipping out, I was the one who took just about 60 seconds to think about everything that's happened in this case, and I immediately made a connection. Okay, so I'm going to tell you, and then explain, okay? And I want you to think about this. This actually proves that Bertolino is most likely telling the truth. I know, everybody hates Bertolino, I get it. Hear me out, though. Ready? If they thought that Brian returned to the home in the Mustang on the 15th, you follow? Okay. Then they knew he wasn't at the home the other 2 days. If they thought he came home on the 15th, that means they knew he hadn't been home. Let's take that further. There was the abandoned car report on the 14th. Now, is every officer in Northport, involved in the Brian Laundrie Gabi Petito case? No. However, they do have a database. When they filed the abandoned car report on the 14th, they most likely entered what? A license plate, right? Okay. They would have known, since first contact was on Saturday, and then they went back on Sunday to get the van, and they kept going back to the home, that they had a Mustang, and they had a pickup truck. Okay. Police were going past the home on the 13th. They were going door to door talking to their neighbors. They would have seen the Mustang was not in the driveway on the 13th. On the 14th is when the story exploded. And guess what? The Mustang still was not in the driveway. So then on the 15th, guess what? Here comes the Mustang, right? And it gets back in the driveway. Police are now saying, oh, well, when that Mustang came home, that's key, which means that it hadn't been there prior, we thought Brian got out of the car, which, like I said, we'll get to that in a moment, but we thought Brian was in the car, so we felt confident on the 16th that Brian was in the home. Now we know about these video cameras, right? Okay. So let's just say you guys lost track of him, even though you had a camera set up on the 13th. Okay. I'm trying not to laugh here, but this is just... The saying, like, you can't make this stuff up sometimes gets on my nerves because sometimes it's really, like, oversaid. I get the saying, and I say it too, but sometimes it's said too often. But in this particular case, I feel like it rings true so often. Like, seriously, you can't make this stuff up. I had a loss of words here. But let me try to gain some words here to explain this. So, okay, you miss him, right? He takes off on the 13th. You happen to not see him. Okay, it happens, right? Okay, how? I don't know. You had cameras, but okay. We'll just throw you a bone there. But that means the cameras were there on the 14th, and then a lot of cameras were there on the 14th because that's when reporters came rolling up into town, right? Which means that everybody didn't see that Mustang in the car. The driveway. Okay. And if you saw Roberta drive the Mustang back into the driveway, which at that time you thought was Brian, then how did you not see Brian and Roberta get in the pickup truck, leave, go to the reserve, spend a certain amount of time there before then returning in two different vehicles? Didn't you see them leave together and come back in two different vehicles that you should have known that one was Roberta and not freaking Brian? What? But just going off of the fact that they were like now saying, well, when the Mustang returned home on the Wednesday, the 15th, we thought that was Brian. Tells me that you knew that he had left at some point because you thought he came home. Now, the Mustang really wasn't talked about amongst the public and the reporters until the 17th. Now, this is what happened. So, no, it wasn't there in pictures, the few pictures that exist on the 13th. No, it wasn't there on the 14th in reporters' footage once they rolled into town. Yes, it was back in the driveway on the 15th, but I don't think anybody questioned anything about this particular Mustang for some reason. And that was because what happened was on the 17th, when police showed up to the home about Brian not being in the home, at one point police came out of the home and they went into the Mustang. They were only in it for maybe a minute and a half. It looked like they were looking for something. And at that point, everybody perked up because they're like, what are they getting in that Mustang? Like, nobody knew that was his Mustang. So we thought they were looking for evidence. And in my mind, they were only in there for a very short period of time. So I was like, there's no way they're looking for evidence because they weren't doing like a really thorough search. It looked like they were looking for something specific. And in my head, I thought, you know what? Maybe the parents don't want to come out of the house, or Brian doesn't want to come in the house because at this time we thought Brian was in the home, and maybe, they sent them out there to get something from the Mustang. We now know that, of course, the reason why they were interested in this Mustang had something to do with him taking off in this Mustang on Monday. And then it wasn't until hours later when police finally left the home, probably within like 5 minutes of them leaving the home, is when news broke during the live feed that had been streaming for hours. Oh my gosh, he's not in the home, and he's been gone since originally it was, Tuesday. We now know it was Monday. And everybody just went, woo, wow. Now, Bertolino is claiming, like I said, that he told them, and he's saying the FBI confirmed that he told them on the 13th, the night of the 13th, that Brian didn't come home. Okay. So then we have Tuesday, we have Wednesday, we have Thursday, where the chief says, yes, we know where Brian is. They're now claiming the reason they said that was because on Thursday, God, I keep saying the day wrong, Wednesday, that the Mustang came home and they thought Roberta was Brian. Okay, great, wonderful. But Bertolino, in his version of events, is saying that on Friday the 17th, which is a different version of events than what Josh Taylor has said, was that police or the FBI contacted him or contacted the parents and said, we have a sighting of Brian in Tampa and we want to see if he's in the home, or we want to check to see if he's in the home. And they basically were like, well, we told you that he didn't come home on Monday night. So if you want to come by and have a talk with us, come on by. They set up a time, and that's when police went by there. Okay. So now put that in context of this. If they thought they saw him come home on Wednesday, but really it was Roberta, okay. And then Thursday they're like, no, we know where Brian is, right? And then on Friday, there's this claim that there's a tip that Brian was in Tampa, okay. And they want to make sure he's in the home. And they're like, we told you he didn't come home Monday night. Then it goes back to, where were you guys Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, when you had these video cameras set up and you at least saw the Mustang come back? How did you miss Brian leaving Monday? And how did you also miss the parents leaving together on Wednesday and coming back in two different cars? And how did you mix that up to assume that it was Brian instead of Roberta when they came back in two different cars? But is it possible this whole claim that, we think we saw him in Tampa, was this the moment that Northport realized, oh crap, the person who came home on Wednesday isn't Brian, it was Roberta? And then they came up with this, quote unquote, supposed sighting in Tampa. So they're like, hey, is that the moment? Is that what caused them to make up this tip in Tampa? Or was there really a tip? I don't know. But maybe it was only a day's time before they realized it wasn't Brian. And now we got to figure out a way to find out if Brian's in the house. I think that's a huge possibility. Kind of like being nosy, to just pretend oh, well, you told us on Monday that he didn't come home. And now, oh, guess what? We have a tip from Tampa saying they saw him. So we want to see if he's in the house, or we want to see. And they're like, what are you talking about? We told you this already. It's been days. But let's take this a little bit further. Roberta looking like Brian. I mean, I know the woman's older. She doesn't look like a dude. She doesn't walk like a dude. She's not heavy. I wouldn't say she's heavy, but she's heavier than Brian. Brian was a string bean. Now, he was 5'8" or 5'9". She might be 5'8", 5'9". I would say she's probably more 5'6", 5'7". I don't know for sure. I haven't seen her driver's license. But every time she wears a baseball cap, and 9 out of 10 times that she leaves the home, she's got a baseball cap on, you see her hair. Now, yes, there's pictures of Brian with hair, but still not as much hair as hers. And if the police just went off the body cam footage of Brian and the Moab stop, they would have known that there's no way his hair grew that fast and that long, that quickly. She does have a shorter haircut for a woman, but it's still a ton more hair than Brian should have been having at that point in time, because now we're going way back, right? The Moab stop was the 12th. If we're going back to the 15th of September, that is only a month after the Moab stop. So his hair growing that much in a month, I know some people's hair grow really, really fast, but not like that, period. So in every picture of her that you see her with a baseball cap, and I'm going to put them in this video, you see her hair, okay? So that alone should have gave it away. That is not Brian. Plus, Brian is a very thin. He's a very skinny guy. If you look at Roberta's calves in comparison to his mother's, there's a difference. And a man's calf to a woman's calf already looks different. So, I mean, just look at that alone. And let's just say she was wearing pants, which I've seen her in, I think, mostly capris, but I'll double check that. Even still, she's got hips, for Pete's sake, okay? And she looks like a female from behind or from the front. So this whole, idea that it was Brian is absurd and ridiculous and laughable, okay? Now, if they would have said that we thought Christopher Laundrie was Brian, I think that would have been more believable. I would have been like, okay, well, if he had his head down and you couldn't see his face, that's believable, because Brian and his dad seem to be somewhat the same size-ish, okay? They seem to sort of dress alike. He, too, always wears baseball caps, and he has a bald head when he doesn't have his hat on. That would have been believable. But to mistake Roberta for Brian? What? Are you really thinking that we're going to buy that? Is this just some, lame excuse to deflect and, cover up your butts because everybody's, demanding answers from you on why it is that Brian got away? What the hell is this? Are you trying to make us laugh? Is this hey, things have been really tough. Let's give them a little laugh? I mean, what is it? I'm kidding, of course. I know the cops aren't going to try to make us laugh, but that's what it feels like. What the hell's going on here? Are you kidding me? This is all you can come up with? You couldn't come up with anything else to explain this other than to say that you thought that Roberta was Brian? Excuse me. But let's talk about this, okay? We don't know when Brian died. We don't know how he died. We can only assume. To me, this is my opinion, and until we get more information from the anthropologist, we don't know, okay? I think Brian went to the reserve on the 13th, and he walked in, a short time later, he killed himself. And that was that. And he was dead rather quickly. And everybody wants somebody to blame. They want to blame someone. They want to point the finger at someone. They want someone to pay. It's so easy to say, blame the parents, attack the parents, accuse the parents, arrest the parents. Even going after Northport or the Moab police or whatever, even I've gone after the Moab police and I've gone after Northport. But I don't blame them for all of what has happened. I think there was a lot of missteps and mistakes that just kind of blow my mind and how ridiculous they are. But I don't blame them. I don't blame them for why Gabi is deceased. I don't blame them for why Brian is deceased. So let's take that further, though. When somebody is set on taking their life, they're going to find a way to do that. They are. If they're just already mentally checked out, that's their goal, they're going to make it happen one way or another. Could the police have stopped Brian if they did see him leaving the home on the 13th? Well, at that point, he wasn't a person of interest, or at least not labeled that, and he wasn't a suspect. They were doing surveillance, despite what Josh Taylor said, because they had cameras. Okay. But could they have stopped him? Well, if they did see him leaving the home, they could have followed him to the reserve. Okay. And then, he gets out of the car, officer gets out of the car, follows behind him, and sees where he goes. Either Brian picks up on the fact that he's being followed, or the officer stops him. Okay, great, wonderful. What's the officer going to do then? He's going to say, hey, Brian, blah, 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 you're right, you're this, you're that. So now Brian might feel a sense of I can't do this now. And then he goes home, right? And now he knows that the police are following him. So he knows that anywhere he goes to go take his life, he's most likely going to be followed. So what's he going to do? He's going to kill himself in his home. So really, in all honesty, even if they had followed him, all that would have done was basically tipped him off to the fact that they were keeping tabs on him, right? Because here's an officer, he's walking behind me, he's stopping me, great, so now every time I leave the house, I'm going to be followed, and how am I ever going to go to what I want to go do to take my life? And he's just going to do it in his bedroom. Which, hate the parents all you want, but could you imagine if this did happen in their home and they had to walk in to that? I mean, millions of families have done that in the past, walked in and somebody that they loved had killed themselves. It's awful, and I wouldn't wish that on freaking anybody. It's horrible. So if that would have happened, well, this wouldn't even have really gone into such a big story at that point, because if it was on the 13th or the 14th when the media showed up and things exploded. So if we already knew Brian was dead, as soon as Gabi was found dead, that would have been the end of it. Done deal, right? What's made it so much more crazy was like his silence, not knowing he took off, then finding out he took off, then oh my God, is he here? Is he there? Is he everywhere? And when this crazy, ridiculous information came out tonight about this whole mistaken identity thing, there was actually people in the comments going, well, can't the parents be arrested now? And it's like, how are you getting this out of this information? It's not the parents' fault that the cops thought she was Brian. It's their fault. But this just goes to show that people just want to blame somebody. They want somebody to pay for what has happened here. And in this particular situation, instead of saying, wow, Northport police, how the hell did you freaking mess that up? They're like, oh my God, can their parents be arrested for this? When it's like, how is this their fault? Which goes into, is it the parents' fault that Brian is dead? Because there was somebody who called into WFLA live feed today, and I didn't agree with anything that she said. She said that every decision that the Laundries have made besides Brian's role has led us to where we are today. No. I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with that. Well, first of all, they couldn't control what Brian did to Gabi, which, again, they still haven't, said that he killed Gabi. We all assume that, and that's most likely the case, because why else did he kill himself? You don't kill yourself because you think you're going to be accused of something. Okay, so they couldn't control Brian's actions out there, so that's not their fault. Him coming back is not their fault, okay? And if he lied to them, which is most likely the case, even though nobody wants to believe that, that's not their fault. Their son lied to them. And as far as choosing to not speak or help with finding Gabi, well, I mean, they did take their Fifth Amendment, so it's not really their fault as far as where Gabi may have been located, because they might not have known where she was located. They might have really thought that she was just missing from, like, Long Island or wherever. So, can't really say anything about that. But then if you go into that week, the week that Brian takes off to the reserve, is it their fault? Their adult son made a decision, if he killed himself, which it definitely does appear that way. I find it very hard to believe that he went out to an area he's been to a bunch of times, and this particular time in the middle of all of this is the time that he ends up getting eaten by an alligator or killed by a snake. I just think that's a little bit of a reach. I mean, possible, but I think that possibility is rather slim. So I'm going with he most likely killed himself. How? I don't know. But let's just go with that. They can't stop their son from leaving the home. He was an adult. Okay. The lawyer said the other day, he said something, then he apologized and explained, and then he changed his wording. What he initially said was that the parents did know that Brian was very upset when he left the home, and he used the word grieving, which of course sent everybody in a tizzy because they're like, oh my God, how did they know that he was grieving? Because everybody associates grieving with death. So they think that this was a slip up by the lawyer trying to say that the parents knew that Brian was grieving Gabi's death. When, if you look at the definition of grief, it's basically deep sorrow, and then other words for it would be, sadness, anguish, pain, distress. And I'm aware that most people use that word for death, okay? So when he said this, I was like, I didn't even think twice about it, because I'm like, that word could be used for other things. But then he explained actually later on that all day he had been doing interviews, and he kept referring to the parents being in the parents grieving. So when he said this, he misspoke. He just meant that the parents knew that Brian was very upset when he left the home. So now let's go back to, is it their fault for letting him leave? Again, he was an adult. He's an adult. I mean, what are you going to do? Maybe because he was an outside guy and he liked hiking and the great outdoors, in their mind, maybe they just thought he was really upset that Gabi was quote-unquote missing, and to protect his rights and to not be falsely accused, he was being forced to be quiet. Or not forced, that's a bad word. That he knew he had to be quiet. Let's say it that way. That he knew he had to be quiet because he could end up falsely accused in a crime. And so maybe they thought he was just really upset about that. And he took off. And there was nothing they can do to stop him. If they would have followed them there, then what? Then what? Maybe they just thought he was going there to really just hike and relieve that stress. Maybe they just felt like, oh, he's going to go for a hike. He's, really stressed out about all this. He's going to go blow off some steam, right? We all blow off steams in a different way. Maybe that was what they knew Brian would do when he needed to blow up steam. So they might have known he was upset, but I don't know that they knew that he was upset enough to end his life, enough to follow him there. And again, even if they had followed him there, just like the police, okay, now he knows you followed them there. So either A, you're not going to witness your son killing himself, or B, he's going to now know that if he leaves the house, his parents are going to follow him, just like the police. And therefore, what is he going to do? He's going to do it in the home when everybody's sleeping, and that will be that. Or he'll find a way to sneak out of the house in the middle of the night and then go do it. He's going to try to escape anybody following him to go do what he has his mind set on doing. From there, allegedly, according to the lawyer, they did tell the police. It does appear that way with this new information about the mistaken identity. It does. It definitely looks that way. And then, Tuesday they go out there looking for him. They don't find him. They check the areas that they knew he would go to at first. Maybe they didn't look, deep enough, just a little bit. They don't see him. They go again. They don't see him. They take the Mustang home. Again, it was going to be towed. It doesn't really freaking matter. And so, what exactly is their fault for how we are where we are today? Remember, it was the FBI and Northport and law enforcement who spent over a month in the freaking Carlton Reserve with every possible resource, every boat, every vehicle, every four-wheeler, every type of dog, dive team galore, okay, and found nothing. It wasn't the parents, it was them. They found nothing. So, and I know that that particular area was underwater, but clearly the water had receded, because then when they opened it the next morning is when the parents went there and they found him. So what we should be saying is, why did you not check those areas again now that the water had receded? That's not the parents' fault. That's law enforcement's fault. I'm sorry, but it is. And tomorrow I'm actually going to try to put this video together, because I went back and I saved all this video footage, and interviews, and I want to make like a compilation type of video, because in one, it was the first day that they were searching for Brian in the Environmental State Park and Reserve, and Josh Taylor's outside and he's giving a press conference and he's going over all the things that they're using and what they're looking at, and he's like, oh, it's mostly water in there. And so he does mention there's water, and at one point when he's talking, he actually points out to the right-hand side, because he was pointing to the canal. And the canal, there's like this little bridge, and it takes you over to the reserve, and that is actually where Brian was found. So it was over, like, right where he's pointing, which is kind of ironic. He's looking in that direction, and his arm's up, and you see him looking out that way. And he mentioned that they had been using boats out that way because of the canal. But then he says, we're starting in the environmental park, which is 200 acres, and then working out to the reserve on that side, meaning going over the canal into the reserve. So he said it, that they were searching this area where Brian ends up being found, across from where he parked the Mustang, and from the environmental park, right across the bridge into the reserve area off to, it appears, to the left if you're looking at it from an aerial view on Google Earth. And he also mentions there being like unpaved roads or trails by power lines, which there's an actual power lines road, which is very close to where he is found. And you actually see when the parents are out there last Wednesday and the officer walks over to them to show them a picture of the backpack, they're standing in this power lines area. So Josh Taylor on September 18th, on the first day of searches, already is mentioning the particular area Brian ends up being found. So you're sitting here going, but you just said that you guys were looking over there. Okay, but the water, but you were using boats, and you were using swamp buggies, and you were using ATVs, and you were using dogs. So again, it goes back to like, how? Because at that point, let's say he killed himself on the 13th, he may or may not have been eaten at that point. I feel terrible saying it like that. I really do. But because that would only been 5 days versus however many days it's been that they've been out there. I freaking lost track. It was like 33 days or whatever from when they started. It was something like that. Okay? And then, again, why would you not go back to that area once to check to see, like, we can't check that area too well. It's underwater. Maybe that was said back on September 18th. So you kind of put that off to the side and you're like, all right, well, there's too much water over there. When we're done looking every place else, we'll go back over there before we wrap up our search in this area entirely, and we'll search this area if the water has receded. That wasn't done. And I think that's a major mess up because, then the parents go out there the next day after they open it and boom, they find their son. Or they find the bag, which is close to their son, whatever. Them going there is what unraveled this, and this is why everybody's like, oh my god, this is so sketchy, they must have planted things, No, the only thing planted in this freaking case, which was the title of my video from Friday night, is cameras. Cameras that apparently were useless, okay? So imagine if they'd done that. So, let's say the day before they opened up the reserve, maybe they went back to that area and was like looking around, and maybe they would have found it, but it doesn't appear like they did that. So they could sit there and keep saying, well, it was underwater. Okay, great. But at some point, it clearly wasn't underwater anymore for the parents to go out there the day after it opens and immediately find something. So why didn't you check again? So there seems to be a lot of deflection going on here, and any type of explanation or excuse that's being given for why it seems that things weren't handled what seems to be like in a common sense way really aren't good explanations, and definitely have an underlining tone of deflection, in my opinion. But again, going back to, is anybody at fault here for Brian? Let's just say, for Brian going out there, let's just say that on Wednesday the 15th, the police realized, oh no, that's Roberta, that's not Brian. Even at that point, if Brian went out to the reserve on the 13th, and ended his life then, which again, we don't know, it was too late. It was too late. Even by that point, he was still gone. He would have been dead and gone. And, the same thing kind of goes for, and this goes back to my video, I think, from Thursday night, where I made the comparisons to Gabi and Brian's death, and I said there was a lot of similarities between the two. With Gabi, yes, her parents delayed reporting her missing because they were chalking it up to all these other things and trying not to get ahead of themselves, basically. Like, oh, it's okay, she's probably fine. But even if they had reported her missing on the 1st of September, let's just say, it was too late. She was already deceased, so it really didn't matter if they would have reported her sooner. Same thing goes for the parents. Like, if they told them on Monday night, even that was too late. Do you see what I'm saying? And if police or the father or the mother had been keeping tabs on him and followed him to the reserve, the only thing that would have done was show Brian that he can't go anywhere to do what he wants to do, and therefore he would have to find another way to do that. Sneaking out the back door, hopping over fences, going out in the middle of the night very quietly and leaving before anybody can follow him, doing it in his bedroom. If he had that in his mind, if he had set his mind to do what he was going to do, then he would have done it regardless. Now, of course, all this doesn't matter if it comes back that he didn't kill himself. He walked out there, and just by chance, this one time that he went out there out of probably 100 times, he got eaten by an alligator alive. I highly doubt that, but of course, like anything else, there's a possibility. Which goes back to the WFLA person saying basically that this is the parents' fault why we are here today. No, it's not. When you break it down and you think about it, no, that doesn't add up. It doesn't. And I know so badly that so many people want these parents to be held accountable. They're angry with them. They don't like them. They're this, they're that, But at the end of the day, it may very well be that these parents have not done anything wrong at all whatsoever. And I know the public, and I know the public doesn't like to admit when they're wrong about something, typically. And when they get their mind set on something, they won't let that go. And when they want somebody held accountable, they don't let that go either. So, hey, by all means, if you want to continue down the path that they're the big evil monsters and all this, by all means, go for it. Now, as far as if Brian took his life, I want to talk about this, because this came up on WFLA's live stream today, and it's, I always have a lot to say in those live streams, but I never do because the comments go by so fast, and then you never get seen, and you're just like, whatever. But JB, the main host guy who does all the live feeds, said, was the media around on the 13th? And I could answer that because I already researched this, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, when that one video I did showed no Mustang in the driveway on the 13th. And when I did that investigation, I found very little articles about this case. It was mostly local news from Northport area, Tampa area, and from Long Island area. And at that point on the 13th, they didn't even say her name in articles. They were referring to her as a Blue Point woman from Blue Point, which we know she lived in Northport. So I don't know why they were doing that, but that's what they did. And that could have been because that's where she was filed missing, so who knows. And they were referring to Brian as like a travel companion. That was the initial reporting. That was on the 13th. So what I found was that almost all the media got involved on the 14th, including myself. The 14th is when I first saw the story, because I saw it earlier in the day and I started immediately taking notes because I just felt in my gut it was going to be this really big story. And I came that night, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, I don't even remember. Actually, you know what? I think I recorded that one in the middle of the day, which I rarely ever do, but I wanted to get the story out as soon as possible. So now with that in mind, you have to think about Brian's state of mind. Did the media play a role in what he decided to do? I'm going with no. It didn't have anything to do with it. And as a matter of fact, let's take that further. So 11th is the first contact in the evening. Okay. So now he knows that her parents are worried. He knows now that the cops know that the van is back, right? And then on Sunday, they take the van. That's what he knows. So he knows that there's now this investigation into finding Gabi. And in his mind, eventually, maybe at some point, evidence will lead them to where she is, which, if he did something to her, would come back to him. And he did have this lawyer that he apparently knew since he was a very small child, or even when he was born. And he knew he didn't have to speak, but he knew at some point, possibly, the evidence would lead back to him. Okay, great. And he might have known of a few of the local news stations being outside, because on the 13th, there were some people outside taking pictures of police leaving pink envelopes for the parents and the dad doing yard work. But again, those are like only 3 pictures that exist from that day. Trust me, I searched and searched and searched and searched and searched. So really, when Brian left, that's all he knew. That's it. That's it. He didn't know about the vloggers' footage of finding out where the van had been in Grand Teton. He didn't know. This is if he died on the 13th. If he left and went there and immediately did what he did, which I think that's just the case. I mean, why would you go out there and sit there for days on end and then do it? He probably just went there and did it. Boom, in the moment, done. We're going off a lot of ifs here. I'm just saying, at that point, if he did do it that day, he didn't know about the vlogger's video. He didn't know that Gabi had been found. He didn't know about Gabi's autopsy results being homicide. He doesn't know about any of it, right? So did the media play a role? Did that pressure from the media? No. I'm going with no. So now you have to think, okay, so take away the media pressure, right? Because it wasn't at that level yet. It was growing, but it wasn't there at that point on the 13th. So his frame of mind was really just knowing what he did and knowing that the police are now involved. And his time at home, just living casually was over. Which, I mean, I think Brian wasn't a stupid person. I think he knew at some point that was going to happen. And I have my theory now on why I think he actually came back, because I think that was one of the stupidest things he ever did. But in hindsight, really looking at that, if he wanted to go on the run, he could have simply done that from Wyoming, and I said that on this channel. So he didn't. He came back. And then there's this camping trip. So it makes me believe that he actually came back and wanted to spend time with his family because he already knew what he was eventually going to do. So this tells me that he, was either just a coward who couldn't handle the thought of prison and killed himself, if he killed himself, or there was a tremendous guilt of what he did to Gabi, or he didn't want to live now without Gabi. That's possible. And a shame to be alive when his parents find out what he did. That could be huge, that there could have been a sense of shame. He didn't want to face his sister, his nephews, his brother-in-law, his parents, and he just had this great deal of shame. But then I think about it, and I'm like, this SOB, okay, if you left on the 13th and took your life that day, that means that you intentionally left this earth without even knowing that this woman who allegedly loved at some point, this woman's body was found. Which means that if there was never any evidence that came out later on, you left this earth never letting anybody know, possibly, where her body was. And what if those vloggers never found their footage with the van? Would they have ever found her in Grand Teton? Would they have ever known that she was parked in the Spread Creek area on the side of the road? Do you know how large Grand Teton is? They might have thought Wyoming. They might have thought Grand Teton. But they would have been searching Grand Teton for a great long time without that footage. That's for sure. So then I go, well, did he kill himself because he felt guilty, or that he felt like he couldn't live without her? And I go, okay, maybe. It would depend. Well, what would it depend on? Well, the notebook. What does the notebook have? Did he actually write the location of Gabi in the notebook? If he did, then that would lead me to believe that he did feel a sense of guilt for what he did, remorse, and possibly couldn't live without her. If he left no information on where Gabi was, well, then I'm going to go with it was all selfishly driven as far as being a coward, not wanting to go to prison, feeling shame and not wanting to face his family, and had nothing to do with any sort of remorse or Gabi at all. So I'm really curious and really anxious to find out what is in that notebook. They said it is salvageable. It was wet, but they think they'll be able to get some stuff from it. That's going to be key for me on what his motive was, because we now know, just based on everything, that the media really was not involved on the 13th to have been a part of his decision to take his own life, if he took his own life. Now, a few other things, and then I'm going to wrap this up. It's funny, I started this and I was like, I'm just going to make like a 35-minute video. No, it doesn't work that way. Why? Because I have a lot to say. Number one, context is key, right? I come on here and just tell you what the ridiculous news is and then give my opinion, but all that context is really important to the story. And also, sometimes people don't listen to every single one of my videos on Gabi, right? And so they might be a little lost if I just come in here and start talking where I left off the last time, and I don't mention things that we've talked about before. And then it's for anybody who's new to the channel, who may be watching this for the first time, and then they can go back to, if I say something here that I mentioned we've talked about before, they can then go back to those videos and hear those things. So if you're new, welcome. I have many videos about Gabi and Brian, so you're more than welcome to go back in the playlist and listen to some of those. So this is why I have to repeat some things and why it ends up being over an hour-long video. It is what it is. So over the weekend, people are getting nosy now, and I don't really understand it, but hey, whatever. They're going out to the reserve, to the area Brian was found, and they think that somehow they're going to go out there and they're going to find, all these items and evidence and bones and, I don't know, his hair or his head or something. I don't know. They just think they're going to find something. Which, ew, no thanks. I don't want to see that, okay? Not that it would be anything significant anyway. It would just be like a bone, but still, I don't want to see that. I think the only interest I would have at going there would just to kind of get the on-the-ground visual. Because right now I'm going off of helicopter footage, pictures, reporters' footage, and then Google Earth, right? So if I was going to go there, I would be going there just to have a visual of everything, like how far the parking lot is to the bridge, and how far the bridge is to where he was. Where was the location? How far was he from the other areas where they were searching? I wouldn't actually just be walking around searching for any parts of Brian. I'd just be kind of looking at above the ground just to get a good understanding of the layout. But hey, to each their own. So people went out there or whatever, and I guess allegedly, and I don't know if it was one person or two different people. I think it was two different people. One person found a water bottle, which is the identical water bottle of one that was used in some of the footage and photos of Brian and Gabi. There's one picture where it's in the back of the van. There's a video where Brian's drinking out of it. I think it was on Instagram or TikTok, and you can see it's a very specific bottle. It's green. Allegedly, it's like a good bottle for like not drinking out of plastic, which we know Brian didn't drink out of water bottles, or so he said, as far as plastic bottles. And so they find this bottle, and I guess allegedly they called the police out there. They kind of like looked at the bottle, and then they didn't take the bottle. And then this person took the water bottle and brought it to the police department, and it was checked into evidence. Now everybody's like, why aren't they taking the water bottle? Why aren't they taking the water bottle? Blah, blah, blah. I'm going to keep this real simple. I don't think the water bottle really matters in the grand scheme of the story, right? We know Brian's dead. We know his body was over in that area. If it was his water bottle, it really doesn't change anything. Okay, it's his water bottle. You found it. It's not going to have anything on it that's going to be of any type of evidentiary type of information, right? It's a water bottle. And if Brian was trying to give his parents the image that he was going to go hiking, then it would make sense that he left the home with a water bottle to make them think that. That doesn't mean that he spent a week out there because he had water with him. It could have just been some type of prop to make his parents believe he was going to go hiking. And of course, if he ends up killing himself or gets killed, that bottle is going to be out there. Unless the bottle has blood on it, it's really not of importance, honestly. And also, you have to remember now the park's been open for a few days since they then had to close it to search, and then they reopened it again. And in that time, everybody knows about this water bottle for the last 6 weeks because it's in photos and footage from Gabi's social medias. So anybody could have just bought that bottle, planted it out there, and then called the police and said, hey, I found his, and then get your 5 minutes of fame, get clicks and views on Instagram, TikTok, blah, 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 blah. But again, at the end of the day, it doesn't even really matter. It's just a freaking water bottle. It's not going to do anything that's worthy of anything. Although I'm glad that she did take it to the police station after the police didn't want it, so that they can at least have it, and maybe they'll eventually decide to test it just to see if it was Brian's, just for the hell of it. Thing is we know Brian was out there, and we know Brian's dead. So that bottle doesn't really play any type of role to help us. And then it seems somebody else claims to have found bones and a rope and something else. Or it might have been the same person. I don't really know. I think all this is kind of silliness. Just because you're talking about a reserve, okay? And if Brian and Brian's dead body had been eaten, obviously, by whatever, buzzards, gators, wild animals galore, birds, bugs, etc., to the point that he was just bones left, then of course, if he was, then you have to assume that other possible dead animals were also torn apart and eaten. So it wouldn't be abnormal or weird or strange or alarming to find other bone type things out there, right? That might just not be human bones. So we know that after they found these remains on, I think it was Wednesday, that they had closed down the reserve for a day or two and were searching for other parts of him or other pieces of evidence. Could they have missed a bone? I mean, yeah. Do you see all the brush and trees out there? Jeez, it's like insane. I don't know how you could find anything. And if it's a little bone, like a bone from a finger or a toe, or like even like a arm, that would be hard to see in all that brush. So, I mean, yeah, it could be his, possibly. I don't know if they called the police. They might have. But again, you have to consider that if Brian was eaten, then another animal could have been eaten out there too. And maybe what you found wasn't a human, but an actual animal. To go back to the water bottle for a second, and I said that if he wanted to give the illusion he was going hiking, let me go further with that. That explains the backpack, and it explains the dry bag, because if he was leaving the house, making them think like, I'm just going for a hike, it makes sense, because some people are like, why would he need the backpack if he was just going to kill himself? Well, if he wanted his parents to think he was going hiking, he'd take the backpack. If he needed to transport a gun to the reserve, he's going to need a backpack, right? Because you're not going to just walk from the car with a gun in your hand. You're not just going to walk out of the house with a gun in your hand. You're going to need to conceal it in some way. The dry bag even makes sense because he's like, oh, I'm going to go for a hike, and he's got his dry bag. His parents obviously know what the dry bag is. Then it gives and plays into this whole illusion of he went hiking, or I'm going hiking, Mom and Dad, don't worry. Now, one YouTuber said while they were outside the reserve the other day when this was all happening that the rumor was that a gun was found. The FBI has not confirmed that information. So just because they haven't said so or have not confirmed such doesn't mean that they didn't, right? People said, well, if they did, then they would be able to give us the manner and cause of death. And right now they haven't given us a manner and cause of death. Well, sorta. Because they could think to themselves, well, maybe he had a gun with him, but maybe that's not how he killed himself. You don't just gonna automatically jump to he used the gun to kill himself. Maybe he brought the gun with him because he was, using it for protection, or maybe he brought it but then decided to kill himself a different way, like hanging himself. So, I mean, you can't just see the gun and just be like, oh, gotcha, he killed himself. He, blew his brains out. Which leads me to a news story that came out this weekend that some 35-year-old guy was camping in Fort DeSoto and he was fishing, and I guess he actually hooked a gun that was wrapped in like a Publix bag, and it was in a bag with like rocks to like weigh it down, and somehow he pulled this thing out of the water, which is crazy because Fort DeSoto is like it's like out in the water almost. I mean, it is not almost. It is in the water. So whoever dumped it wasn't really smart, and this person was like, oh, well, they really want to have this thing hidden. Well, not that much, because you found it so easily, and Lord only knows how long it's been there. It could have been a day, could have been freaking 5 years, nobody knows. But of course, because it was found in Fort DeSoto, which is the camping place that they all went to on the 6th, this immediately made people connect this to Brian's, and so they're like, oh, maybe the parents killed Brian and they went and dumped the gun in Fort DeSoto. I mean, is that impossible? No. Is it likely? No. Come on. I think we just want to connect it because it's Fort DeSoto and because people really want these parents to be involved in some way, that they either killed their son and, threw his remains out in the reserve, or they knew he killed himself, so they went and got the gun from where his body was and they went and disposed of it. Okay, that makes no sense, because then they're the ones who go and find his body near his, they didn't find the body, they found his belongings, which ended up being near his body. So that doesn't make any sense. I mean, I get why everybody jumped to the conclusion that it's probably connected, but at the same time, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, guys. Which is also funny to me, because the people that are so hardcore against the parents thought that the parents loved their son so much that they were willing to risk going to jail for him and help him to escape. Sometimes people thought to help him escape the country, to help him hide out from place to place. Everybody was like, oh my God, they're protecting their son. And so they thought that they loved him so much that they were willing to do this. And at the same time, those same people are now like, oh, well, maybe the parents killed him. Maybe the parents, one person's One person said maybe the parents knew that he was going to go kill himself and they let him. One person was like, oh, maybe Brian was like, here, kill me, and they killed him, or they knew he killed himself in this instance because of Fort DeSoto gun being found. They knew he killed himself and they went and got the gun and then disposed of it. Listen, you got to make your mind up. Either they really, really loved their son to help aid him in escaping, or they hated him so much that they were just like, okay, son, go ahead, go kill yourself. We'll cover it up and throw away the gun. Or hated him enough to kill him. Because one person's theory was like, and she wasn't alone because a couple of people agreed with her, that once they found out that he killed Gabi, they killed him. So what is it? Do they really, really love him enough, or they really, really hate him? It can't be both. But this just goes back to the people who set their minds on the parents and really want these parents to have some type of involvement. It doesn't really matter which way that it ends up being that they're involved. They just want them to be involved for whatever reason. And most likely it's just so that they can pay for what has happened, because they need someone to blame and someone to pay for what has happened here. But ultimately, no one's going to pay for what's happened here because both of them are dead, and that's that. A true tragedy that did not have to happen. Gabi and Brian were both alive and living their lives and living this, what was supposed to be amazing trip, seeing amazing places, and not too long after that, they're both gone forever, leaving behind 6 parents who are devastated and reeling from all that has happened. All will be playing the coulda, woulda, shoulda game that we all do after something happens, where we're looking at everything in hindsight. Everything's much better in hindsight. It's a whole nother story in the moment as things are happening. So they all now have to play that game, and they will, probably for the rest of their lives. At the end of the day, Gabi and Brian were both adults. We don't know the extent of the issues in their relationship. Some believe that both were toxic. Some, like myself, believe that she was the one that was solely abused. Other people think that he was the one who was solely abused. We don't know. We haven't gotten that far into getting answers on the dynamics of their relationship. We may eventually find that out. And so they were both adults. They both decided to go on this trip. Whatever happened, happened. And if it was Brian killed Gabi, which it does appear this way, of course, because you wouldn't, if he killed himself, you wouldn't just kill yourself because you're afraid of being accused. You're going to kill yourself because you know what you did. Brian's parents have no role in what he ultimately did to Gabi at all. It's so easy to blame the parents. Oh, blame the parents, blame the parents. Oh, you must have raised this psychopath. You raised him. You raised a monster. Listen, their job as a parent is lifelong. But once he became an adult, he became his own person. And he wasn't just 18, he was 23, actually almost 24 years old. And therefore, any actions or things that he did that were wrong are solely on him and him alone. Period. And if he ultimately decided to take his life, that's on him and him alone. And I know he's not here to blame him for what happened to Gabi. That doesn't mean that somebody else needs to pay instead. Ultimately, he did by taking his own life, which death is the ultimate price. So there's that. And he gave up ever seeing his family again, seeing his nephews grow up. He gave up never seeing another body of water, beautiful sunset, beach, Fort DeSoto, all of it. And he ended it all. And in a way, you can say he ended it, in his mind, possibly for everybody. Because that could be part of what played into his motive of, well, if I'm dead, then this will stop for everybody because I'm gone too type of thinking. He got the easy way out, right? He got the easy way out. He's dead and gone forever, and he's dead. He's dead, right? Like, he's not just dead. Like, he was eaten. It's, like, insane. There's, like, little to nothing left of Brian Laundrie. It's like, one minute he was here, and now he's just like, woo, he's way gone. But that's it. I'm done talking for the evening. So that's that. And all the things I wanted to discuss today. We're in the waiting process. We have to see what the anthropologist finds out from the bones. God only knows how long that's going to take. And we're currently waiting for, the police to kind of like wrap up the investigation, finish what they started basically, and wait for the moment where they're willing to share some parts of this investigation with us. So we're all kind of sitting on the edge of our seats at this point, just waiting for those drops of information that might come at any moment. So until next time, I'll see you soon.